ceremony. So they all started following him. Like dozens of devotees started marching. Prabhupada just laughed, turned around, laughed, and held his hand and said, "No, you all stay here."
And then when he was ready to go again, he made a gesture with his right hand, like onward, forward, and all of a sudden all the carts started moving again. Thousands of people just started moving. It was so wonderful. It was the most wonderful feeling to be just anywhere near Srila Prabhupada.
My friend Vatsara, he came to visit me in San Francisco, and we started going to different spiritual communities. By this time, I had kind of accepted this spiritual master, Swami Satchidananda. I didn't really know that much about him, but I read Prabhupada's Bhagavad Gita, and I said, geez, I need a spiritual master. But I didn't really think of the author of that Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada, the old one, the blue Vishnu on the cover. So anyway, we went to this group and that group, and he said, well, let's go to the Hare Krishnas. And I said, oh, I've been there, because I had been there for a Sunday feast, and the guy was kind of a yogi and this and that, and the devotees are running around here and there. I said, it's a little bit, just running around too much for me. So you go ahead. So he went, and he spent the whole day there, and he came back, and he talked about, God, I went there, I met this guy, the garbage man. And he was just so far out. He told me all this stuff, and he was just going on and on and on. And it turns out that was Jayananda. He spent the whole day with Jayananda, emptying the garbage and going here and going there. So he said they're having, another program in the evening, and so I said, okay, I'll go with you. And so we went, and that was it. The next day, we went out and bought cloth for dhotis and cloth for saris and beads, and by the time we got back home, we had decided we're going to shave up, and so we shaved up, and we shaved up the kids, and we showed up at the temple the next day. The boy said, what are you doing? You can't do that. Anyway, we said, here we are, we're doing it, and like that. So from this association with Jayananda that we became devotees. So me being a practical, mechanically minded person naturally fell in with Jayananda, because he was always doing something, fixing a car. We'd go out and work, and I just was kind of like Jayananda's right-hand man at that time, and we'd be out working on the carts or, stuff like that, or going to pick stuff up to bring back for the carts, or at the temple preparing something for Rath Yatra. And Prabhupada came, and like I said, Jayananda's mood was that, what are we going to gain really by going to just see Prabhupada? He wanted this service done. So that was better than being in Prabhupada's presence. That was, more satisfying to Prabhupada, and therefore it would be more satisfying to us. And so, we just did that. And Jayananda, of course, didn't say that and then run off and go be with Prabhupada. Actually, after Rath Yatra, later that day, Jayananda finally went over to go see Prabhupada, and he wasn't there 2 minutes, and he fell asleep. Prabhupada made some comment, I think, about Jayananda sleeping. Some nice comment, oh, he's worked so hard, and now he's sleeping.
People follow, imitate Americans. I am traveling all over the world. Everywhere I see they're trying to manufacture the skyscraper building, imitating your country. So, if you kindly become Krishna conscious and chant and dance in ecstasy, emotional love of God, the whole world will follow you, and it will be Vaikuntha. There will be no more trouble. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama.
Prabhupada went on stage. Vishnu John was on the corner of the stage. Baudak was in front of Prabhupada. Behind Baudak from the crowd, there's a hand sticking up. That's my hand. I was standing there with Vishnu John's mother and Vishnu John's sister. And I had been explaining to his mother like what the harmonium is, and the Madanga, and that how popular and how well loved Vishnu John was in the movement, and how much we appreciated his singing, that he actually was the best. She was very proud of her son. Prabhupada, after he finished his short lecture, he started to throw the roses from the stage. I was hoping that Vishnu John's mother would catch something, and Prabhupada threw the whole bunch of roses, and she caught it.
When Prabhupada went on the stage at the end of the procession, I also tried to go on the stage, but some person who I didn't know stopped me and said that no women were allowed on the stage. So I tried to reason with him, saying that I was authorized by the BBT trustees and they had paid for my fare and my film. But this person was adamant. So I left the stage and I went to the middle of the field behind the huge assembly of devotees and guests. And I sat down in an empty chair there. And a short time later, I looked up, and to my surprise, Srila Prabhupada had gotten up off the Vyasasana and was raising his arms in the air and beginning to dance. So I immediately climbed on the chair and began to take photographs. And it turned out that I could not have found a better position to be in than that very one where I was. So I'm grateful to this person, who apparently was an obstacle, but in fact was a great help in my service.
I actually had a premonition that something amazing is about to happen, and then it did. Prabhupada got up, began dancing, jumping up and down, and as he danced and held out his arms, stretched out his arms toward the crowd, he began turning as he danced from side to side in stages. And we could see Prabhupada just showering blessings on the people. It was practically visible. There are many pictures, there's many photographs. There are these extraordinarily ecstatic expressions on the faces of the devotees. It truly was a mystical, spiritual experience. I personally have always been more inclined toward philosophy and sort of spiritual logic than just esoteric, mystical things. But this was miraculous. It was truly miraculous. You could see Prabhupada showering blessings on the people.
Then he left the stage and went back to the temple, and we kept dancing and chanting until the sun went down. Oh, we just felt lighter than air. We were just so joyful and so happy to be dancing and chanting with Srila Prabhupada. It was the most wonderful, joyous event.
We were out in the crowd serving prasadam, and there was a kirtan on the stage. There were a lot of people sitting in rows, and we were serving, but there were also a lot of people behind the rows, standing, facing the stage, listening. At a certain point in time, the crowd was chanting, and they became visibly stirred, like roaring. And everybody's hands were up in the air, and all the devotees that were serving the prasadam, we all turned, like, what's going on? We looked at them, and then we turned around and looked back at the stage, and Srila Prabhupada was on the stage with his hands up in the air, just jumping up and down, with a big smile on his face. It's like almost like a transference of incredible happiness, just shot through the crowd. And everybody simultaneously in that moment became surcharged with mercy, really. Prabhupada's mercy. He just gave everyone mercy. Clearly, he was just so happy to see everyone celebrating Rath Yatra.
This is a Bhagavad Gita dance. Krishna is played by Sadarupa, Arjuna by Anasuya, and the sage by Jambavati. And we took the 108 principal verses, or danceable verses, from the Bhagavad Gita, and I narrated it while they performed it, using ballet and Bharatanatyam to tell the story of the Bhagavad Gita. And Prabhupada saw this in the Los Angeles temple, liked it very much, so we did perform it in India in 1975 and 1977. And he also liked the system of having a narrator speaking and the actors or dancers just acting it out. He said that way you can go any country in the world and just have the narration in whatever language the people understand, and the performers can act out the dance. He very much encouraged us in this utilizing fine arts for spreading Krishna consciousness. And one morning walk, he said, yes, if whoever's an artist, let them dance only, let them paint only, let them, whatever their art is, they should do that for Krishna.
When we heard Srila Prabhupada was to be interviewed at a TV station in San Francisco, we tagged along hoping to be able to film him. So we showed up at the TV station and asked the producer if it was all right to set up our 16 millimeter camera and shoot, and he said, why not? He was very obliging. I was surprised, actually. During the interview, you'll hear a thumping sound as Srila Prabhupada is speaking, and that's his hand, as you can see in the visual, going up and down, thumping on the table. Unfortunately, we had placed our microphone right next to his hand. We didn't pick a very good place for the mic. As we were shooting, we could hear that thumping, and of course, we couldn't really stop the interview.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You founded the Hare Krishna movement some 7 years ago in 1967, did you not?
Yes.
In a capsule, what is the movement?
The movement is to awaken God consciousness of the human being. The human being is distinguished from the animals, that the animals cannot understand what is God.
Mm-hmm.
And if the human being also does not understand what is God, then he is enemy.
I see. And so your movement is to bring about an understanding of God among human beings.
Yes.
And Hare Krishna means what?
Hare Krishna means addressing the energy of God. Hare means the energy of God, and Krishna means God.
Mm-hmm. Okay, you were here yesterday and to attend your annual festival that was held here in Golden Gate Park, and we were there too. And in fact, here it is. A few thousand people came out to hear it. How many people are now disciples of the Krishna consciousness movement?
Dedicated life, about 10,000.
About 10,000 dedicated
in
ones.
the Western world.
Mm-hmm. Your Grace, is there any significance at all in the shaved head? Why are heads shaved?
We keep ourselves very clean, that's all.
Oh, it's just a cleanliness thing?
Yes.
Is there any significance in the color of the robes?
At least at the present moment, people think that by keeping long hair, it becomes very beautiful.
I see.
Yes. So we are against it.
Mm-hmm. Just as simple as that. Is there any significance in the yellow robes?
Yellow robe is the dress, those who are dedicated.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
It could very well have been a blue robe. It's just something that was arrived at.
This saffron.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Your Grace, why do you feel that so many people are pulling away from the traditional religions in this country, such as Christianity and so forth, and going for the trying to understand the Eastern religions? We hear a lot of swamis and gurus and other type of yogi and so forth. Why do you feel that people are pulling away from the traditional Christian standards here?
But we see that the Christian churches, especially I have seen in London, mostly closed. People are not interested, or the Christian leaders, they cannot make them interested.
Why? Did Christianity fail the people, which is why they're turning to other things? Or?
I think so.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. You say that Hare Krishna consciousness pretty much takes the absolute truths from the Bible, the Quran, the Torah, and the Vedic.
Yeah, everywhere.
Everywhere.
Religion means to understand God.
I understand, but do you feel that in getting truths from various places like the Bible and the Quran and so forth, don't you run into conflicts at all or contradictions in those particular philosophies?
No, I don't find any conflict, because the ultimate goal is God. So you have to understand God and try to love Him. So you can go through any religious process. If the goal is attained, that you understand what is God, and you try to love Him, then your life is perfect.
Why do we see so many of your followers chanting almost all the time?
Chanting means to keep association with God always.
So you have to audibly chant Hare Krishna?
Yes. This is transcendental vibration. Just like a radio message. If you keep contact with the radio message, then you know everything what is going on outside. Similarly, this transcendental sound, Hare Krishna, if you chant, then you keep connection with God directly.
Thank you very much, Your Divine Grace. It's been our privilege to talk with you and to meet you.
Thank you very
And
much.
hope that we can see you again when you return.
Hare Krishna. Yeah.
We'll be back with more news in just a moment.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare.
Right now I'm looking at this beautiful footage of Srila Prabhupada's arrival at Dallas Airport in 1974. I was 7 years old at the time. And I remember how excited we were, you know. By this time, I think this was my 5th time maybe of getting to see Prabhupada. And from my experience at that time, the movement was so wonderful. It was going so well, like, especially as a child. That was the universe for us. That was it. Prabhupada's coming was the greatest event going on in the whole history of the planet. That was the vibe. And so I remember we all got ready. We go to the airport and we're waiting for Prabhupada. Then he finally shows up and this huge kirtan. And then there was just such a joyous feeling.
I drove a bus to the Dallas airport with all the children. It seemed like I was the only one who had the experience of driving that big a vehicle. And we got there and we're all waiting expectantly. I'd never met my spiritual master before. The excitement was so high. Finally someone said, he's coming. The kirtan's going uproariously, I remember that. And then we all hit the deck. And then when I got up, it was like Srila Prabhupada was parting the Red Sea. That was the feeling that I had. I was just crying in ecstasy, finally getting to see my spiritual master. And even before seeing him, you could feel the wave of his presence coming down this long corridor. It was just overwhelming.
They had a room set up for Prabhupada to greet the media people. So then we all go in there and it was set up really luxuriously and there's lots of prasadam and flowers, and Prabhupada sat down and then the media people started asking him questions, and that's a famous one where they ask, well, what is a hippie? And one thing I noticed even as a kid was the way our teachers had of making us look down on karmis and people who weren't devotees. And so we always had this feeling, you know, once we see Prabhupada interacting with these people, they're either just going to fully surrender or he's going to just smash them and show them what fools they were. So first I noticed just how charming he was to everyone. He really knew how to bring out the best in the people and want them to feel positive about meeting him. And I really noticed that he didn't smash them and get heavy with them. He actually would win them over through charm. He would get them to laugh. He'd get them to feel good and comfortable around him. And I really, really admired that, especially because our teachers were kind of young guys and they didn't have much life experience. So they had a real heavy mentality. And so when we'd see Prabhupada, we were always waiting for him to do that to people, but I never saw him like that. It was always just wonderful, charming, and he would reinforce the sincerity and the genuineness in the people that came to see him. And I have to admit, too, I remember feeling a little surprised, how come these people that just got this wonderful exchange with Prabhupada didn't immediately just run to the temple and follow us and shave up or put on a sari or anything.
We were in Dallas, and as a traveling Sankirtan, we'd come all the way down from Montreal. It was probably just after Mardi Gras. We went out to the airport. We missed Prabhupada when he arrived. So by the time we got to the temple, there was Guru Puja going on. And up until then, I'd never seen Prabhupada in person, and that was after 6 years of being involved in Krishna consciousness. And when I saw Prabhupada, I just related to him as a moving picture of Prabhupada. He looked like Prabhupada, the picture who was moving. And that was my impression at that time, that Prabhupada was actually not different in his picture.
There was a discussion, Prabhupada was talking about Vedanta, and he was saying that the Mayavadis couldn't understand Vedanta, and then he began to question us, why couldn't they understand? He was specifically mentioning Ramakrishna and other famous Mayavadis, and he said, why couldn't he understand? And so then Brahmananda replied, Nahang Prakasha Sarvasya Yogamaya, that verse from Bhagavad Gita, and Prabhupada wasn't satisfied with that answer. And then someone else gave another answer, but he wasn't satisfied with that either. Then finally, Dayananda sat bolt upright, and he said, they cannot understand because they haven't got Bhakti Vedanta. So Prabhupada smiled and said, here is the answer. And it was such a nice answer on two levels. One, that they didn't have Prabhupada, and on the other level, they didn't have any Bhakti. So how could they understand the end of truth? So Prabhupada was really happy with that answer. And I remember I kind of felt like all of us were slightly envious that Dayananda had come up with this fabulous answer.
Bali Mardana came with his wife, and Prabhupada in private made some comments. Why you'd given up sannyas for this particular lady, because she wasn't who she had been said to be, and she wasn't all that attractive. But Prabhupada received him very nicely, and he was just so encouraging. I thought that was very, very instructive, how somebody had some difficulty, but Srila Prabhupada never forgot the service that they had rendered, and his love for those who surrendered their lives to him and helped him. Certainly these special souls that helped him extensively in the early days. His gratitude was boundless. And as we heard later on in the 8th canto, that one may have difficulty in one ashram. The ashram wasn't the main thing. Wherever one would find strength, one should situate oneself in those circumstances so that one could continue in one's Krishna consciousness.
The Dallas Temple was quite involved in studying Bhagavad Gita, and we would have a verse for the day, and that would be chanted before every part of the morning program. It would be chanted before the prasadam prayer. As a group, we would recite the verse, and the idea is that by the end of the day, pretty much you knew the verse. And in this way, we were quickly learning entire chapters of Bhagavad Gita. So we were quite proud of ourselves. And there used to be a prize. If you could chant an entire chapter of Bhagavad Gita without making so many mistakes, you would get a Mahaplate. And that was a really big deal. So when Srila Prabhupada came, we were very proud of our accomplishments. So we brought the entire temple in and all the children, and we started the recitation of Bhagavad Gita from chapter 1, verse 1. And I think by that time we could get through 10, 12 chapters in unison as a temple. It was a very ecstatic feeling to be chanting like that. But at the end, Prabhupada just stopped us cold, and he pointed to one of the children and said, "So what does this particular verse mean?" And of course, we were not so expert in being able to give the meaning for the verse. And Prabhupada stressed upon us that as nice as it was that we were chanting the Bhagavad Gita in Sanskrit, it would actually be more important to know the meaning.
Because I had some educational background, I was sent to Dallas. I had the unique situation of being drop-loaded as a new devotee into a situation as a teacher. So while I was taking care of the children, they actually taught me Krishna consciousness. They were my bhakta leaders. Their Krishna consciousness was completely genuine. So those principles that I learned from them, like full dependence on Krishna and turning to Krishna at every moment, are what has kept me in service to Srila Prabhupada's movement all these years.
Well, I believe this is the first school, isn't it, in the United States to be established? Why was Dallas particularly chosen for the school?
That's Krishna's choice.
Krishna's choice. He chose Dallas.
Yes, we got a nice house, and we accepted. So it was Krishna's choice.
Where does the Krishna National or the International Krishna Organization get its funds? From simply donations? They've been criticized occasionally for being very wealthy.
Yeah, that is our reputation. Even in Indian Parliament, this question was raised. That these Hare Krishna people, fabulously rich, where they get money. Somebody suspected we are getting bribes from American government.
The Krishna religion teaches that women are to be subservient to men always. Why?
The Krishna religion teaches that women should be subservient, should be subordinate to men. He's asking why.
Well, not should be, they are, by nature. What do you think, your position?
I don't believe in that, of course. I disagree.
But if voluntarily become subservient to a man, that is the nature.
Does that make them less of a being?
They're seeking to become subservient, attracting man. Take me as subservient. That is natural.
But women live longer than men.
Huh?
Women live longer than men.
Not necessarily.
So
Yes,
it got you.
sometimes it is. My grandmother lived about 100 years. My mom. So sometimes it happens.
Let's see, now how...
It is not restricted amongst women. There are men also.
One of Prabhupada's lectures there at the temple, someone asked, what is it like to be in the position you're in? It seemed like the question was addressed, what is it like to be the guru? What is it like to be in your exalted position, have so many people worshiping you and so forth? He just said, I am never afraid. It was amazing. You could have heard a pin drop for about 30 seconds there. It was just completely quiet.
So we greeted his car there. It was a very short distance from the curb of the street to the temple, but we greeted him throwing flowers. And then he went into the temple and offered his respects to Radhakala Chandji. If he spent any time in the temple at all, he hardly said anything, very short. Glad to be here, glad to see the children again. And he went up into his room where he's passing out rasgullas.
Everyone's sort of dispersing and going back to their respective places, the classroom or I was taking my son home, and all of a sudden one of Prabhupada's servants came running through the building saying, Prabhupada wants to see all the children. It was such a terrific surprise. And, the mothers got their babies. He said, everybody, all the children. Because at first we were thinking it was just the school children. And we all came up and he said, Prabhupada has rasgullas for all the children. And so everyone started lining up, and Prabhupada gave a rasgulla to each child. The kids, all they've seen is pictures of Prabhupada. They've heard stories of Prabhupada. They learned the obeisances to Prabhupada. But here he was. And they were just awestruck. And my heart was so filled because having a child, I knew how he's reaching them on such a personal level. And he even asked for the babies. And Jagadish, he would say something about each child. Prabhupada, this is so-and-so, and he would say a thing about him. When I brought Ishwar Puri up, he said, and this is Ishwar Puri. He's Mandaleshwara's son. He's a rascal. And Prabhupada just laughed, and then he gave him the rasgulla. Then he dropped it. I picked it up and gave it back to him. And years later, we saw this footage. And Ish told me, he said, when I dropped that rasgulla, you picked it up for me. That's been the story of my life. I'm dropping Krishna consciousness, and you're always picking it up and giving it back to me.
I specifically remember a meeting in which some of the teachers asked Prabhupada's advice about teaching. And at that time, I seem to remember there were kind of two camps. One camp really wanted to be very loving to the students. They somehow wanted to control the students through affection or through love. And then another camp of teachers wanted to be very strict with the students.